live. Here we go. Good evening, America. Good evening, planet Earth. I am Dana, the angry citizen, coming to you live from Brewer, Maine tonight. Today is March 23rd, 2022, and I am joined by a very special guest. Sheriff Dar Leaf of Barry County, Michigan, joins me today to discuss some critical issues regarding the authority of the sheriff. And we're going to clear up a few things because this is extremely important, America. The sheriffs have the ability to protect we the people in their counties from any and all unconstitutional actions, and we need to rally behind that. So I'm really, really grateful for Sheriff Leaf joining me today. Um, as you know, I'm Dana, the Angry Citizen, founded a movement, the Angry Citizen, in order to unite constitutional Americans behind our Constitution and reinforce our rights and hold our elected servants accountable and restore transparency and real justice and make sure that the Constitution, as the supreme law of the land, is enforced for everyone. Sheriff Leaf is a subject of a little bit of controversy, which I love. As you know, I'm not at all above controversy myself, so I'm very pleased that he's joining me here. We're going to talk about some critical issues. Sheriff Leaf, thank you for joining me tonight, sir. Really appreciate it.
And can't say I like controversy. I just don't fear it. there's a difference.
Well said. Well said.
Yeah.
So please, if you would, just give us a little bit. When we talked on the phone, you gave me what I thought was an awesome little background about yourself that was really well delivered, I thought. So please tell us a little bit about yourself and how you arrived where you are as the sheriff of Barry County in Michigan.
Oh, I could go on for an hour on that, by the way. You ask a politician to take the mic. All right. No, really, I grew up in a county called Shiawassee County, and it was kind of a rural county. A lot of farms. The biggest city in Shiawassee County was Owasso, and the county seat was Corona. And I went to Corona High School, and graduated there. And it's one of those things where everybody's telling you, oh, you got to go to college, you got to go do this, you got to do that. Well, my dad was a GM UAW Democrat, so I kind of grew up around a Democrat family. And when I say the GM UAW Democrat, those are kind of conservative Democrats. They believe in your Second Amendment. They believe in your right to free speech and so on and so forth. But doggone it, don't mess with the union. And so, anyways, I kind of grew up around that. And then when I started seeing the direction that that party was going, I kind of started looking at the Republican Party. And so I kind of started leaning towards those beliefs. And so, anyways, I was looking what should I do? So I worked in the factory for a little while right out of high school, and that was quite a treat. I was on day shift, and the next youngest guy to me was 42 years old, and here I am 18. And so I could tell you stories on that, but some other time. Anyhow, didn't really like the factory. I wanted to be outside, wanted to be challenged a little bit more. So it was almost like I threw a dart at a board and it hit law enforcement. So left the house, moved over to Grand Rapids, opened up a newspaper, found a bedroom for rent. Went in there, moved in that night, actually, and a wonderful family. And it was over not too far from Aquinas College. And I decided to go to the police academy there, and went and got a full-time job and worked full-time going through the academy. And more and more I got into the academy, more and more I liked it. Did well in the academy. I got my first taste of corruption. I was a reserve officer in a little village called Middleville. And I was promised, because I was trying to go through paramedic training, so I'd get my paramedic license also. And I was promised that before my certification ran out, because when you go into Michigan, you go through the academy and you pass the state exam, you are certifiable. Once you get hired and sworn in, then the agency that swore you in will send information to the state saying they swore you in, then you'll get a state certificate saying you are a certified officer. Well, between the time of you taking your state exam and getting sworn in, you had 1 year to find a job. Well, here I am going through paramedic training. I thought I had that job all laid out. 2 weeks prior to me getting sworn in, the police chief gets fired. So I'm left hanging. And I had no idea why he got fired. Finally, one of the full-time officers there pulled me out to the side and was explaining what was going on, and it's like, wow, that's horrible. And it was fraud type corruption. And then I started learning more and more about him being corrupt. So I had to go through another police academy. And when I got out of there, the new police chief swore me in right away. And I ended up there in Berry County and did 16 years regular law enforcement. Last 3.5 years, I was a school liaison officer. And probably the most rewarding job I've ever had. And that's basically our focus was getting the kids that were truant, getting them back into school. And when we did that, we saw a significant drop in juvenile crime. And plus relationships I developed with these kids. I still have some of them come up and give me a call every now and then. And in fact, one young lady that I was working with when I was a school liaison officer ended up walking her down the aisle for her wedding.
Nice.
So, yeah. So anyways, there's some things going on at the sheriff's office that I didn't really like. And I'm one of those people who had an axe to grind and ran for office. And lo and behold, I won. And this is my 5th term. I got 17 years under my belt. This is my 18th year. And it's been quite a ride.
Well done. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions, and these are critical questions. And this is part of a program that I'm sort of creating, which I call lawful jujitsu, which is basically my attempt to teach and educate as many Americans as I can about their rights. And the basics of this are critical because Americans mostly don't know their rights. We're not taught them in school, even though we're supposed to be. We're not taught our rights in school. We don't learn about the Constitution. We breeze through it. They touch on it, but they don't really get into it. And there's also a lot of misrepresentation out there right now about the Constitution. So as a part of this, the program, which is my hope to sort of re-educate Americans and get them to think differently about how we interact with our elected servants, mostly regarding politicians, but also regarding law enforcement, virtually anybody that we elect to a position of authority. And the number one thing that I encounter is that people have an attitude that, for example, if a politician issues an order, mandate, proclamation, whatever label they slap on it to basically say they're going to give you an order and you need to do this thing, is to ask first and foremost, what authority do you have to give me this order? What is your authority that gives you the ability, the lawful authority to order me to do something or to order me not to do something? And it starts with an oath. Everyone that is elected to office swears an oath. So I'm going to ask you, Sheriff Leaf, did you swear an oath when you were elected?
And a sheriff is a 4-year term. I have to take an oath every 4 years because it's almost like a new sheriff every term.
Gotcha.
So yes, I've taken 5 of them so far.
Okay.
Well, 6. Even my deputies have to take one every 4 years. So I've taken a lot of oaths.
Good. Yeah. All right. So when you were elected as the sheriff, what was the oath that you swore?
I do solemnly swear that I'll support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution for this state, and I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of sheriff. And for the city of Hastings and the county of Berry and the state of Michigan to the best of my ability. So yeah, I almost got it word for word.
That's all right. I actually was looking for more of a summary and anything else, but verbatim is fantastic. So thank you. I love hearing that. I love it. And you know, I have a phrase I use a lot. And that is, the truth is the sword of God. Because when you ask someone a question or make a poignant statement of some sort that is truthful, you can see what it does to people. The liars and the con men, they flinch, they cringe, they look away, they get scaly. If you talk to someone with integrity and they're performing an action that's nefarious or self-serving or outside the realm of their authority, whatever, and you call them on that and you ask them straight up, look them right in the eye and ask them straight up, you can see them rein in. You can see them going, wow, yeah, you know, this is not good. What I'm doing is not good. I'm lying. I'm cheating. I'm whatever it is. So thank you very much for that amazing and poignant representation. So America, when you're dealing with these people, when you're dealing with law enforcement or dealing with your elected servants, ask them that question straight up. Sheriff?
Thank you for referring to us as servants. I'm not an official. I'm a servant. So thank you for that. I noticed that right off the bat when you were saying that. I'm going, finally, somebody understands.
God bless you for that. I've had a difficult time. That's part of what I'm trying to teach people is these people, the politicians. Mostly, I'm referring to politicians when I say elected servants. But you're right. Everyone we elect to an office is an elected servant, and they serve we the people. And this is part of what I call the power paradigm, which I did a little video on that. Which basically we right now as Americans have accepted a power paradigm where the people at the top, these politicians, I call them the overlords, rule us. They're in charge. They're telling us what to do, giving us orders, and then the enforcers, which are the law enforcement folks that don't seem to understand as you do that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, enforce those unconstitutional laws, rules, mandates, whatever, and we the people at the bottom become servants or serfs. And we need to flip that power paradigm. We the people are in charge, and the sheriffs and the law enforcement community serve us and protect our rights, and the elected servants serve us, and we've delegated them limited authority, and they cannot simply, and we're going to get into this a little bit more here in part of my notes, they cannot simply give themselves more power. They cannot just write a rule, write a proclamation, and say, I literally have as much authority to do that as the governor of our state. I've explained this to people in my state. I have as much right to tell you to close your business as anyone else does. So no one has the right to simply say, you have to close your business or I'm going to punish you. So thank you for that. So let's start with,
And we didn't.
thank you.
I did not allow my deputies to do that.
I, I had heard that and I appreciate it. We had a sheriff here in Maine too. He's actually a friend of mine. His name's Scott Nichols. He's the sheriff of Franklin County. He's a good man. He's a man of God, and he's served his county very, very diligently and faithfully. And he actually had the courage to speak out as well. Unfortunately, he took a lot of flack for it, which I find very disturbing. That he literally, doing the job he was sworn to do, said, "This is not Nazi Germany. This is not China. We're not going to run around asking people to show us their papers." And he got a lot of heat for that, which is insane to me. But anyway, he has my support. You have my support. All constitutional sheriffs have my support. All law enforcement who honor their oaths have my support. I did a podcast recently with an attorney from Boston. His name is Bill Gens, and he's representing the Massachusetts state troopers and first responders in fighting back against these unconstitutional mandates. And I told them the same thing. I have your back as long as you are doing your job correctly and you uphold your oath. I totally have your back. So let's go ahead and move on because we've got a lot of stuff to cover. So first of all, I want everyone to know that, and I've checked these things very, very diligently. I do a lot of research before I stick my neck out and make statements like this. But I do know, and I've never had this disproven, although people have told me this is wrong. No one's ever supplied me with any evidence that it is wrong. That the sheriff is the supreme law enforcement official in their county, and they can no person with any kind of federal agency or any kind of police presence has authority over the sheriff. Is that correct to your understanding, Sheriff Leaf?
Amen.
Okay. And
yeah, why? You got to ask yourself why. Why is that? And it's because the sheriff is elected directly by the people, makes him the servant. He's what we call de jure. Everybody else would be de facto. In other words, somewhere along the line, there was an elected person who appointed somebody who hired you guys. Where me, I go out and get my deputies, and I hire my own deputies, and the law says I can hire as many deputies as it takes for me to carry out my duties.
Excellent.
That makes sense?
Makes sense to me. Makes perfect sense. Yes. So can you please tell us a little bit about, you and I've talked a little bit about this, but I want to get into it for the sake of all of the folks listening, both Americans and I have like two people in the UK that watch me too, which is kind of cool. But tell us about the duties of the office of the sheriff. Just a little bit about that.
Oh, there's all kinds of duties. We have in Michigan, it's Article 7, Section 4 in our state constitution, and it says every 4 years, an organized county shall elect a sheriff, and then it goes into a clerk, a treasurer, and then a prosecutor, and whose duties and powers shall be basically determined by law. And I'm not saying that word for word, just by memory. And what people forget about is when you start talking about law, we have statutory law and then there's common law. And common law is what we call law of the land, due process. The process is due to you. It's a birthright, okay? And that's where we miss so much on this. Everybody thinks that, oh, I have constitutional rights. And no, you don't. You have birthrights. The Constitution doesn't grant any rights. The Bill of Rights didn't grant any rights. It gives job descriptions, and the Bill of Rights tells government no. And until you get to the like the 12th Amendment, then it says Congress shall have the power, Congress shall have the power. And if you go look at the first 10 amendments and look how they flipped them later on when government started getting big. But anyways, a lot of your duties are, we have basically four. Obviously the law enforcement, and then there's judicial, ministerial, and those are duties we have that we have to do. There's no way around them. And then, I forgot the fourth one. I shouldn't have said that. I had them being able to rattle them off. But basically running a jail. But that was running a jail actually come years after the sheriff was the chief law enforcement officer to the king. And in this country, the kings are the people. If you go look at, do you mind if I get a little bit of history on it? And
Please
gave
do.
you some slides. All right, if you go look at King Alfred the Great. King Alfred the Great was back in 871 to 899 AD, and he's the only king in England that was ever called the Great. And there's a reason for that, because when the Vikings were coming onto British soil and they started dominating all these shires, and can you call up one of those slides?
Sure.
Let me know when you got it up there. And if you go look at the map of England there, and you'll see how it's all divided up into these different shires. And a shire is basically a county. And that's where the term sheriff comes from, was a shire reeve. And after a while, we've kind of just bastardized it so much over here, we just call it the sheriff over here on this land. Well, if you go look at that and how it's all divided on up, the Danes or the Vikings started coming in and taking over shire by shire. And so a bunch of some kings got together, and what they did is they put King Alfred in charge of the military. And think about that, because all these shires got together and made one person in charge of the military. If you go to the next slide, it shows a Berry County, and there's 16 townships.
Yep, got that.
Each township has their supervisor, which would be their executive officer. All the power they have goes into the sheriff, and the sheriff has the authority. You just all of a sudden got really blurry. You still there?
I'm here.
All right. Yeah, you really got blurry there. Okay, there you are.
It's all right.
Anyway,
keep right on
each
going.
Township, yeah, we put together our powers, and it's a power of the county. It's called posse comitatus, which is basically a fancy name for militia, because they're the same people. Then in Michigan, if you got the map of Michigan, if people can see that map of Michigan, look how that's divided up into 83 counties. Well, the townships, all 16 townships put together, you have your sheriff, he's your chief executive officer, and your chief law enforcement officer. And also, he is your chief conservator of the peace. So then you go into the Michigan, where you got 83 counties, and all those counties come together, and you have your governor. And your governor, again, is in charge of the militia for that state. So your sheriff would be your King Alfred for the county. Your governor would be your King Alfred for the state. Then we have 50 states, and they all pool their power together, and you have one commander-in-chief of the United States military. That would be your president. So it isn't anything that we just all of a sudden come up and just, our founding father said, let's come up with an idea. That idea was already there, and they just borrowed it, and that's how it's all laid out. And each one of those, your sheriff is your chief executive officer for your county. And the reason is because he has the power to call upon, your posse or the militia. And then your governor is your chief executive officer of the state, because they have that same power to call up statewide, call up the militia. And then your president, same thing. He's your commander in chief of your military. And I hear quite frequently how your prosecutor's a chief law enforcement officer. Well, they don't have the power to call up the posse to go out and ferret out all criminal activity. Only the sheriff has that. Anyhow, oops, I just dropped something there. So that is one of our main duties, is ferreting out all criminal activity. And then we have to bring the misdoers into jail, or bring them into courts. So if you think about it, there's a difference between a police officer and a sheriff. A sheriff has complete discretion. He answers directly to the people, and he is there to maintain the peace. He doesn't have to go out and arrest every drunk he comes across. He doesn't have to write everybody a citation. He has complete discretion. Police officer, and you think about it, police policy, they're a policy enforcer
Right.
for that jurisdiction that they're in. They don't have the same discretion as what a sheriff would have, unless they get that discretion from the jurisdiction that they're working for. And so anyhow, I just want to make sure everybody understands that there is a difference between a police chief and a sheriff. The sheriff is elected by the people. That's where he gets his power directly from. The police chief is basically a bureaucrat for whatever board he works for and answers to. And it's really handy, because when I answer directly to the people, I don't have to have the county board of commissioners here. They can't tell me how to do my job. The governor can't tell me how to do my job. The president of the United States can't tell me to do my job. Klaus Schwab can't tell me how to do my job.
Love it.
But yeah. There is quite a bit.
I'm going to interject something here, if I may, because this is kind of important. One of the things I ran into when I was investigating this, and in my conversations with the Boston attorney Bill Gens, was regarding the authority of the sheriff, which I've been dealing with some folks down in Massachusetts who are freedom fighters down there, and had encouraged them initially to get in touch with their various sheriffs, and was told, well, the sheriffs here work differently. And I said, well, that doesn't make sense to me. I'm pretty sure that it can't be that way. And it came down to, no one could tell me exactly when or how it happened, but the legislature apparently made some pretense of limiting or altering the authority of the sheriff. And I dug into that as much as I could. My day consists of doing lots of research, and it was not the highest thing on my list, so I only looked a little bit. But to my knowledge, and please share with me if you know anything about this, but to my knowledge, no legislature has any authority to limit the powers of the sheriff or to alter the office of the sheriff. Does that ring true with you as well?
Yes, there are cases on that, and I don't have them right in front of me right now, but if you want, I can email them to you, and they're real interesting to read. But what it says is that they can't even take away our common law duties that we inherited from Great Britain, and that we've inherited for centuries. They can't even take that away from us. They can only add to our duties. They cannot take away.
That's what I
And
thought.
Thomas Jefferson, the office of the sheriff, is the most important of all executive offices of the county. One of our greatest founding fathers right there.
I agree with you.
And this is another one too. The sheriff's office has been around since we've been ruled by sovereigns. And you had, I think the king is the only older office, and then the king had to have his law enforcement officer. And if you even read the book of Nebuchadnezzar, talk about the sheriff, and the sheriff's job was to throw somebody in the furnace. It wasn't always bed, roses and everything like that. So anyways, the common law duties, obviously, with the judicial bailiff was the one I was missing, then conservator of the peace and ministerial duties. And like I said, the bailiff, you're sitting on the courts, and basically your watchdog, make sure the courts are being run okay. What happened over the years is that we've kind of gotten away from this, because our job is, we're a different branch of government than the judicial branch. Each branch is supposed to be keeping each other in check. And that's where we kind of lost it over the years, and where we tend to be just more of a security officer for the judge, rather than making sure the judge watches P's and Q's. If you got a judge who is already come to judgment before a trial, that's our job to speak up and say something. The another thing we got is there's nobody but a sheriff who has the power of what they call the hue and cry, and that's where the sheriff may command all citizens of the county to attend him in the pursuit of felons, which is under the posse comitatus. And and it's funny, even if a citizen made an arrest on somebody, he shall make hue and cry to the sheriff and pursue the criminal. Then once he's apprehended, the first person that criminal answers to is to the sheriff. Then the sheriff goes from there to the prosecution and then the courts. I'm hoping this. I hope you're grasping this, because it is important for people to understand that they have that power, and it's frowned upon because we've got so many statutes nowadays rather than the common law. We're not teaching the common law. That common law should be taught since elementary school all the way up through college.
Agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing that people don't understand too is your sheriff represents the sovereign. In other words, the sovereignty of the state. He is the man there for his shire, his county, and I think I already said that part of his job is to commit prison all persons who break the peace or attempt to break the peace. There's your conservator of the peace job. And in Michigan, I think it's Article 26 in our Michigan Constitution. It created making our courts, our judges, conservators of the peace also. And what that did is it created our judges to be in one-man grand juries. I believe if that was challenged, and it was challenged appropriately, because you got to understand, you're asking judges to take power away from a judge, right? I don't think that's lawful. I think that's a conflict, violation of separation of powers. And so when he's a one-man grand jury, he's capable of investigating, and so when he's on the bench there, that's part of a grand jury's duty, is to investigate and see if somebody actually committed a crime or not. Well, your sheriff has always had the power, because he was a chief conservator of the peace, to call upon a grand jury to help investigate crimes. And the grand juries can indict, and then it would go to a petit jury for the actual trial. So I kind of trying to bite off too much here at one time.
You're doing great.
Yeah.
All critical information. All this information is information that should be taught in schools. It's
Yes.
baffling to me that we teach so little of. Well, it's not baffling. You and I know why. It is the curriculum is prepared by the overlords. They don't want us to know our rights. The more ignorant we are, the easier it is for them to assert their power over us and basically force us into slavery, which is what we see going on, despite the fact that a lot of people deny that. Even some people very close to me think I'm insane for saying we're descending into Nazi Germany, even as it is happening right before our very eyes. It's just utterly amazing. So yeah, this is critical information.
Yeah, it is. It's critical. And when you start hearing these, like ever since George Bush Sr. talking about the New World Order, every speech he gave, New World Order. Yep. And then you start looking, because communism was coming in, and communism's been here in the United States since 1919. It was funded by Joseph Stalin. And then shortly after they started the Communist Party, it was CPUSA is what it was called. That's when we got the ACLU. And the ACLU's job was to protect these guys when they're stirring the pot. And you got to hand it to them. They've been around for a long time, and they're pretty good at it now, aren't they?
When I was young, I saw Nikita Khrushchev banging a shoe on a table in the middle of a meeting, and when I read the words that this man was saying, it was terrifying to me. He told us we won't need to fire a shot. We'll take you over from the inside. You will welcome it. You will embrace these concepts, and we will just take over before you even know what's happening. Communism will be, and here it is. It's happening now. We see all kinds of the signs of it, and socialism, and people like socialism. Bernie Sanders admitted he's a socialist. He's not even trying to hide it. So it's
all illegal, by the way. It's all illegal. It's one of the problems we have is people talk about my rights, but how many of you actually studied to see what the boundaries are on your president? That's important. You need to understand what his boundaries are. The same thing with Congress and our judges, our judicial system.
Yes.
And if you really started studying and looking into that they've been out of line for a lot of years. The state bar, the bar, people understand. They say, "Oh, he's a bar attorney." Well, folks, that's a union. That's no different than a UAW for automakers. That's a union. Uh, One thing that we need to hit on real quick here, and I just want to make sure people understand that right at the beginning of our Constitution, it says, "We what?
We the people.
We the people." Does anybody know where that phrase comes from? Because it doesn't. If you look at it, it sounds like it makes us a democracy, and it does not. It was actually pulled from uh, ancient uh, biblical readings, like from the 12 tribes of Israel, the book of Numbers from Moses. And it was referring to anybody willing to protect the kingdom. So it's a militia. We, the militia. And there's three things that the militia does. Obviously, the armed person protecting our land. But who's going to protect our laws? Well, that's your grand jury and your petit juries. So when we say we, the people, it's anybody willing to protect do those three duties. And it's important that you understand what your duty is as a grand juror. And when we start getting a handle on that, start teaching that again, a lot of the stuff that's going on in the judicial courts will be shot down. And we can actually take our country back little by little when we do that. But there's a term, it's called Hayam or Hayam, and it's HA-AM. That was Hebrew, and that meant the people. And that goes, like I said, goes all the way back to the 12 tribes of Israel. It goes way back. And anybody willing to embrace their duties to do those three functions. So militia is not a bad word, folks. Militia
It is
is
not.
us.
Yeah, agree.
And anytime I go out and speak and I'm wearing my uniform, and sometimes I got militia in the background as my bodyguards, and I see other officers out there in the crowd, and they're supposedly security for the city or the Capitol building or something like that. And I keep reminding them they're on our side. Don't let them put us against each other. And I had a
Amen.
friend of mine who was in the National Guard back in the Clinton years, and he was telling me, he said, "Oh yeah, we used to do drills on how to take on the militia." And I looked at him and I said, "You did what?" And he started telling me about it. So I sat down and gave him a long lecture. Now he feels pretty horrible about participating in that. But you didn't know. You're a young 18-year-old coming out of high school. You're just following orders.
Right. We definitely had there's two or three, I think, semi-organized militia groups here in Maine, and I've talked to a few of the people in them, and they're good folks, and I've never had a problem with any use of the term militia. I've debated the Second Amendment many times with people who think that for some strange reason the word militia means that only the National Guard should have guns, even though that's not what it says. And when I educate them about the militia, and one particularly liberal friend of mine, and I'm very fond of him, don't get me wrong, but and he said something to the effect, well, if you want guns, or you want to have guns, you should join a militia. And I said, do you know what a militia is? And of course he didn't. They never do. And when I said to him, the militia is everyone capable of bearing arms, he just looked shocked, incredulous. So yeah, and it's a term that has been used by our government to paint fear into people's hearts so that they're afraid. They always use other terms along with them. So there's the word radical gets attached to it invariably. It's a radical militia. The phrase right wing is often also tacked right on there. So you're a radical right wing militia. And then they use the word extremist. So now you're a radical right wing extremist militia. And now lately they've started to flagrantly use the word violent. So now they are extremist, right wing, violent militias, and none of them are. I've
No,
never met anyone that's ever committed an act of violence against anyone else in more than a defending yourself in a brawl type of scenario. They're not violent people. They're just good, decent Americans who are exercising their God-given right to keep and bear arms, and they want to be prepared. And
Birthright. It's a birthright.
thank you.
Come on, folks. It's a birthright. It's not something your government granted you. Your government doesn't grant you rights. They work for us.
Thank you.
And take a well-regulated militia. A well-regulated militia. That word "a" is so important in that phrase. It tells you a militia that's existed long before they went and put it into the Constitution, into the Bill of Rights. A well-regulated militia. Regulated. You have to look up the word regulated. What did that mean in the Old English common law? It meant that you were had to be regularly armed. You had to be regularly ready. You had to be regularly trained and regularly ready to go in case they needed you. The National Guard is not your militia. It's
Nope.
another branch of the military. And federal government has no authority. There's no authority granted to the federal government to create a militia because a militia already exists.
There you go.
King Alfred, we just talked about King Alfred. He said every able-bodied man had to be armed at all times, even while working in their farms. And why? Well, because if you wanted to go out and destroy your enemy, you'd destroy their food supply. So you had to have people armed out there ready to go. William I from 1066 to 1087. Each shop owner and landowner in England had to keep longbow and 40 arrows and be an expert in the use of those. And that just shows that, it's the people getting involved. I mean, shoot, World War II, Japan, they never went after the mainland, did they? Oh, no, because there is a gun behind every blade of grass. But what you don't hear is when they attacked Hawaii, they went back and they were explaining how much small arms fire they were receiving from the people shooting at their planes when they're flying over. And you don't hear stories like that, but it's there, folks. It is a birthright.
We do see the media very, very regularly demonizing and vilifying gun owners and Second Amendment supporters, and I find that very disturbing. And if at any point a law-abiding man or woman uses a firearm to defend themselves, it is downplayed and excluded. And every time that some villainous scumbag shoots people, they play it up and the horror, and they get all the victims on TV and ask them how they felt when they were hiding and fearing for their lives. And it's just sensationalized, and there is clearly an agenda to disarm us, which is very much part of the manifesto. And again, as you and I were discussing before regarding communism, the manifesto is right out there. All you have to do is open your eyes and look. The information is right there. Read Nikita Khrushchev's speech to the UN when he was banging his shoe on the table. He told us this is what's going to happen, and we're going to take over your media, we're going to take over your schools, we're going to start indoctrinating your children, we're going to pass laws slowly, just one at a time, just ease them in there, and you're going to have less right, less freedom, and less liberty. And that's not the American way. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, and no plans to stop, and unless they kill me, which I hope they don't, because I kind of like being here. But
Well, our Constitution recognizes that both freedom and security are possible at the same time only by the militia. So security and freedom, the militia is key. And I can't stress that enough. Like I said, you have Ted Nugent said it probably the best. Don't you have a gift of life? Don't you have a right to protect that gift of life? Yeah, absolutely.
One of the viewers is asking about the word he uses is interdiction, my friend Jack. So this is ask about interdiction. I'm not sure what he's referencing there, but do you?
Interdiction, no, I don't know what he means.
Maybe Jack, type a little more to me there, brother, when you get a chance, because I want to find out where you were going with that or what you meant by that. So,
well, one thing I want to warn sheriffs on is that if you go read the Mack Prince case, are you familiar with Mack Prince? That's the one where Sheriff Richard Mack took on the Clinton administration.
Yes.
Over the Brady bill. Yeah. And he and Sheriff Prince, There's 7 sheriffs, and luckily 7 sheriffs. Sadly, there was only 7 sheriffs out of over 3,000 sheriffs that had the backbone, and I'll say it, the balls, to stand up to the federal government.
Yep.
And Sheriff Mack took them all the way up to the Supreme Court and won at the Supreme Court. Well, one of the things, actually, I want to talk about a couple things in there that Mack stopped. First, one of the arguments in there was that the federal government didn't give the sheriffs any money, and what they wanted the sheriffs to do was go on out and enforce that Brady bill, and I believe it was they were going to commandeer the office of the sheriff to something about making sure people were mentally fit to be in possession of a gun. And of course, my first response when I heard that was, maybe I ought to do that to Congress. Sorry.
Yeah.
Anyways, what a lot of people don't know is that there was a provision in that Brady bill that they were going to recruit 5,000 communist Royal Hong Kong police to bring them into this country and give them police powers to enforce that Brady bill. Folks, that's a communist country. Anybody tells you Bill Clinton was not a communist, they're higher than a kite. He was relying on a communist country to come in and enforce something that was unconstitutional.
Scary. Very, very scary. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, I'm going to take a quick aside here. What Sheriff Leaf is talking about is there's a organization. This is because I'm bringing it up on the screen here, so you know what I'm looking at. The CSPOA, which is the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, headed by former Sheriff Richard Mack. And there's a lot of resources on this page. I'm particularly fond of one. There's a document. It's the Stance of a Constitutional Sheriff. And this is a wonderful document that, in essence, reinforces and reestablishes everything that Sheriff Leaf just said regarding the powers of the sheriff, the authority of the sheriff. And there's a lot of great resources on here. So this is at cspoa.org, Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association.
Well, thanks for putting that plug in there. I'm a life member of that. And it was funny because when, if you don't mind me getting a little history on
please do. Go ahead.
them and me.
The floor is yours.
I was pretty new sheriff, and I get a phone call, and I had no idea who it was. And they're asking me to come to a conference out in Las Vegas. And I'm going, I don't know who you are, and what are you gonna be doing out there at that conference? And well, we're gonna be talking about the Constitution and constitutional sheriffs and trying to get sheriffs rallied. And I said, all right, well, again, I don't know who you are, and I don't know if I want to spend my county's tax dollars on that. Well, 2 weeks later, I get a call back, and the same person. He says, look, we went and solicited people in your county, and we've got the funds not only to pay your airfare there and back, but to pay for all your meal and your hotel expenses. And I said, oh. So I went and talked to my undersheriff, and he says, you got people in your county, and I agreed with him. He says, you got people in your county, I want you to go to some training, go to it. So I went to it, and I think it was either 2009 or 2010. And this chin hasn't come off the floor since of what your federal government's been up to. Agenda 21. Oh my goodness. We had a professor from Northern Michigan University and his partner come on down and explain to us what was going on with Agenda 21. Never heard of it before. And then there was the IRS, and they were talking about some of the stuff that was going on with the IRS and their own employees. It's stuff that I did to my employees, I'd be arrested. And then they had a constitutional course or a history lesson that I've never ever had, and I still have that, and I use that quite a bit because it's so important, folks. You understand our history, because we don't want to repeat the same dictatorships and the same murdering and all that other stuff they did to get compliance. And right now I see us heading into it. There's that Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum group controlling us. First they started out with our medical, with the Obamacare, which was actually, I think, Hillary care. I think they blew the dust off it and just relabeled it Affordable Health Care Act. There's nothing affordable about it.
Well, it should
And
have been
what,
called the Mandatory Insurance Act, is really what would have been a more accurate title.
yeah, and have a sellouts in our Supreme Court saying, "Oh, that's constitutional." No, no, it's not. Nowhere in the Constitution does it give our federal government the authority to run healthcare. Nowhere. And of course, Robert says, "Oh, it's a tax." Don't care. You still don't have the authority to run a healthcare. That's a private sector. Our job as a government, and this is including the sheriff, is to make sure those healthcare people don't steal from you. And that's why they do have the power to regulate stuff like that. But anyways, they went over so much stuff that my head was spinning. So I joined, and then they had another conference. I can't remember if this next year, maybe 2 years later. I think it was the next year, and it was right around the time when the discussion about the birth certificate was floating around, and they had Sheriff Joe Arpaio there, and he had his cold case team working on that. And here again, this is the value of having your elected sheriff. If it had been a police chief, your city council would have said, "You're not doing that investigation." Sheriff Joe, having the power and right directly from the people, he could do this investigation. I'm here to tell you, folks, you could convince the fifth grader that birth certificate doesn't exist. And they tracked him through parts of the world that Americans are not allowed in. And the social security number stuff that you heard on the internet, yeah, that was true. The fact that they would, I can't remember if they did a investigative subpoena or something like that for his birth certificate down there at the clerk's office in Hawaii, and they refused to cooperate. There was just so much there that they even went after his selective service when you have to fill that out for. They went after that, and because you think about it, do you really think he signed up for the draft, knowing what he was like when he supposedly was in college? Then they went through and tried finding people who even knew who he was when he was in college, and nobody would come on out. It was just really, really, how do you say it? It put a knot in your gut when he got done. And
Yes.
He said he was a foreign national, and that's how he got his college paid for. But then he says a U.S. citizen when he ran for president. I'm going. So I raised my hand and I said, "Well, either way, it's a fraud. It's a felony."
Yeah.
And nobody there to enforce it.
You know, this is one of the biggest problems we face in America right now is this division. We have people who are so partisan, and when you and I talked about this phenomenon on the phone, manifested, I think, beautifully in the phenomenon of Donald Trump. So you have people who just love, worship, adore Donald Trump. They think he is the most magnificent, fantastic human on the planet, greatest president ever. You have people who despise him so passionately they would literally have anyone else in that office. Jack the Ripper could have run against him, and these people would have voted against him. And that was also this case with Obama. And I have a former roommate who just loved Obama, and I tried to educate him, and I wasn't a jerk. I didn't tell him he was stupid. I just said, I don't believe you know all the information that you need to know to form a valid conclusion. The facts and the evidence bring you where they do. The evidence leads to the conclusions, and you have to look at the evidence before you can reach a conclusion. And he just looked at me, he said, "Well, Dana, I don't trust your sources." So he said, "I don't trust your sources." He wasn't even going to look. And that's where we are today. America draws up sides. I love this guy. Candidate X is fantastic. Everything he does is perfect. Everything he says is right. Everything good that happens is because of him. Candidate B, I hate him. Everything bad that happens is his fault. Every time the price of anything goes up, it's his fault. And we don't meet, we don't see eye to eye, and we have to get over that. America, we've got to start looking at the truth of all things and evaluating people based on their merits. We shouldn't be having a Supreme Court justice up there potentially because of the color of her skin or her gender. There should be a person up there who's the best qualified individual for that position. I'd like to see them do it blind. I saw a Facebook meme that said we should do the masked singer with all these politicians so we don't know who they are. All we get to do is hear their views and their opinions, and then we get to vote on them, and then we find out who they are and what religion they are and race and color and all that other good stuff. So
Yeah, I agree. Because isn't that racism?
that's what I thought. If we're going to choose based on the color of her skin, that's racism.
Yeah.
And if we're going to choose based on her gender, that's sexism. How about if we don't do that? Anyway, so I need to point out to everyone right now, everyone in America watching, that Sheriff Leaf is not the only sheriff who is speaking out and saying these things. You won't see him on the news. You're going to see him on my, little backward podcast, from my living room because the media doesn't want you to hear what he's saying. They don't want you to know that there are men and women like this out there, but there are a lot of them. You can see several of them on my BitChute channel from some of the virtual conferences that we have had. And one of the most prevalent sheriffs that's speaking out is Sheriff Mark Lamb from Arizona. If you don't know who this man is, you should, because he is on the front lines of the invasion of illegal immigrants that are coming across the border, and this is a crisis, and it's not discrimination. No one says that people shouldn't be allowed to immigrate to the country. We just can't throw open our borders and let people pour across it, whenever they want. And Sheriff Lamb is also speaking out very loudly about the same exact things: the loss of our freedoms, the devolving of our Constitution, the corruption of our courts. All these things are critical, and I keep beating this drum, and I'm not going to stop. We, the people, have the power to stop this. If we hold them accountable and we demand transparency and accountability from our elected servants, it will happen. It's going to take some time to fix because we've let it fester for way too long. We keep sending these scumbags back there over and over and over, and they keep doing the same things, taking bribes and kickbacks. They call them campaign contributions, and voting with their corporate masters, taking away our rights and our freedoms, and then we send them back because all Democrats are good and all Republicrats are bad. So there's a lot of folks out there in law enforcement and a lot of sheriffs nationwide, and I'm working on getting them all on the same page. And once that happens, boom, game over. All these evil overlords are going to be held accountable, and we will have established transparency and accountability in America, and we will be able to be sure that the elected servants that we send to do this job do it right, because we will make sure that we hold them accountable. And one of the tools we have available to us is this tool here, the internet, where I can talk to anyone I want, anytime I want. I don't need to watch the TV. And if you want to know information about any subject that we've talked about here, all these things can be found if you research. You
Oh,
will
still
not
there?
find these on your TV. I'm here, Sheriff Leaf.
All right. Yeah, got quiet on me there real quick.
I'm fading in and out because of my internet connection is, I'm in Maine. We're a little backwoods up here.
Probably backwoods.
So
we had a Supreme Court justice, Justice Campbell. He's one of our more prominent justices ever in the history of the. Just to give you an example for you sheriffs, if there's any sheriffs out there listening, he quoted, "No officer vested with the powers and duties by Constitution may be deprived thereof, and the Constitution offices of justices of the peace, constables, and sheriffs are so connected with the course of criminal justice as to be beyond legislative annihilation." So there again, that's just how powerful that your office is. And anytime you don't use that power, somebody's going to usurp it from you. And it's not really so much yours as a sheriff, it's the people's power. You just are assigned that duty. Then we got Justice Cooley, and we got Cooley Law School. Justice Cooley was nationally known, and Christensen was the other one. And it talks about preservation of the peace has always been regarded both in England and America as one of the most important prerogatives of the state. It is not the peace of that city or county, but the peace of the king or state that is violated by crimes and disorders. Municipal officers have no power as conservators or justices of the peace. This power is reposed singularly in the office of the sheriff, and if it is assumed by any other local officers, it will be a usurpation. There's all kinds of stuff like this I have for any sheriff out there. If dleaf@berrycounty.org. Send me the request, and I'll send you the PowerPoint that I have here for you. You got to understand that when you talk about the office of the sheriff, these are inherent common law, constitutional, and statutory duties. They're yours. And if anybody else tries to take them, again, it said it'd be a usurpation.
Amen. Thank you. God bless you, sir. Thank you so much for having the courage to speak out. I know that you feel like it's something you really have to do, and I appreciate that quality about you. I feel the same way. I can't remain silent. I can't watch a nation descending into madness, and I can't watch my children and grandchildren being uh, basically sold into slavery by a totalitarian government. So I'm going to keep speaking out, and really appreciate everything you're bringing out here. We're about roughly where I like to be in terms of content. Is there anything else we had originally talked about a little bit about the controversy surrounding your statements about the folks that were accused of plotting the kidnapping of the governor of Michigan? And I read the article about that. It was quite a little hit piece there that they did on you about what a terrible person you are and I believe they said something to justifying or defending the actions of these criminals, and something about blowing the fascist dog whistle or something. And what I read was, in essence, that you asked what I thought was a very reasonable question at the point where there were people being arrested for supposedly plotting to kidnap the governor. You asked a question that I hope, if I am ever accused of a crime, that people will ask rational questions that need to be asked. And you asked, were they in fact plotting a kidnapping, or were they discussing the issue of a citizen's arrest? Because those are two completely different things, and it's a valid question. And of course, you took all kinds of heat for that.
Oh my goodness, there's death threats. We got doxxed 3 weeks straight. I bet you 3 calls a minute, 24/7. And it's funny because those police departments that got burned and all that stuff, they got doxxed. It's an organized effort to go out and do that, trying to shut you up. And they're trying to get me to resign. And no, there's no way I'm going to resign because I'm right, for one. And if I was wrong, I would apologize. But yeah, you are correct. Those are two different intents. And did you intend on making an arrest, which you thought wasn't a lawful arrest, or were you intending on doing an actual unlawful kidnapping of a governor? And plus, I didn't like the fact that the Attorney General's office was leaking a lot of information to the news media. I had contact with one of the attorneys from one of the gentlemen, one of the militia members, gentlemen, I don't care what you want to call him. I know him. He's been general around me, so I'll call him gentleman. Anyways, I had contact with one of their attorneys, and I kept asking him, hey, what are you guys doing? Why is this getting tried in the media? And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, they just released, the news media just has 43 texts between these guys. And he said, Dar, I don't even have a police report yet.
Wow.
And here these guys were sitting in jail. And that's the dirty pool that was being played. I'm going, what the heck? So, yeah, it's time to speak on out. We do not try people in media. They have a right to a fair trial. That's the heartbeat of our common law, is a trial by jury, not jury in social media, by an actual jury of our peers. And they tried whipping me because on I think it was May 18th of 2020, when the pandemic was pretty new, I spoke up at a rally, and I basically said, hey, are we going to sit here in a fetal position and let our economy and our country go to pieces, or are we going to go out and accept the fact that all of us are probably going to get this virus sooner or later and get back to work? And boy, when I went against the governor, I went against the Democrats. No, I'm protecting the law. Same thing with my comments about those guys with the right, you're innocent until proven guilty. I'm protecting the law. Even my own prosecutor got involved in that and shamed me in a press release. And I'm going, whoa, first of all, you're my attorney. You're not allowed doing that. And there's no phone call, nothing. No, hey, what are you thinking? And it was real simple. Quit trying these guys in the news media. and yeah, wasn't trying to defend. If they did it, hey, go do your time.
Yeah,
If
I did
they were,
not read anything in there that said that you had in any way condoned criminal behavior or that you were quote unquote defending them. What I read was you asked a very important, a critical question that should be asked. Again, if God forbid I'm ever accused of a crime, I want to be protected by the same protections afforded any American, that I am innocent until proven guilty. I want a fair and speedy trial by a jury of my peers, and I want the evidence to be heard in a court of law, and I want the decision to be rendered based on the facts and the evidence. And we are in a dark time here in America where we are seeing that many people are deprived of a fair trial and tried in the media, and the bias and the venom and the hate and the discord is really alarming and really um, discouraging at
oh,
times.
they had one group was charged at the federal level for like some type of terrorism charges, and then our governor, I can't remember, it was the night or the day after the arrest. She goes over and talks about this plot against her and all this stuff, and then she says, I wasn't afraid," and she was referring to it because she had her security group around
Security.
her. Yeah, but I'm sitting there going, "You weren't afraid, then why are you charging them with terrorism?" But the state, they do have a good security team, and in reality, I'm thankful none of them got hurt. And that's family and the team, because that's horrible when that happens. Uh, then at the end of her speech, she started blaming Donald Trump, and I'm going, oh, all of a sudden the lights on, and I'm going, we when we're in law enforcement, we study like body language and behavior and statements and stuff like that. And then you have to ask yourself, is that somebody who is really afraid when they're blaming? They automatically go out and make a politics out of it. Why couldn't you just leave that alone? Why? Well, here it was about a month before the general election. And nobody else jumped on that. Nobody else called her out on it. Everybody. Oh, and the other thing, too, is that there's supposedly plots against some legislatures and law enforcement officers, but we never got a heads up on it. So how serious was that threat? If that was serious, you would have let every police officer know in the state that, hey, you got a militia group that's going to try and take you out. Same thing with your legislatures. So there's so many things that went wrong with that. And like I said, just a simple comment about, were they trying to arrest or were they trying to kidnap?
We are living in an age of madness. I never dreamed I would live to see such things happening in my country. It really is discouraging, and for me, it's enraging. I'm an angry guy, kind of by nature. Life has treated me in such a way that I have a certain amount of anger, and when I see the things going on in my country and there's just madness by people that they just cannot examine an issue rationally and logically and arrive at a logical conclusion. They're eaten up with hate and fear and uh, just this weird obsession with either adoring or despising any particular individual. And again, Donald Trump is a great example. He's like the litmus test of this. That you can't, if God forbid I ever say anything critical of him, my Donald Trump supporter friends are very unhappy with me, and God forbid I say anything in his defense, which I have several times pointed out that the things that he was being accused of were not true. And not because I love the guy, but because I just want people to be reasonable. And if you're going to blame someone for something, you should have a valid reason to do it. You shouldn't just be able to say it's his fault because I hate him. But that's where we are in America. So hopefully we'll be able to see this turning around. And I'm starting to feel like maybe I have an actual reason to be optimistic, because a lot of things like my discussion with you tonight, which has been awesome and really informative and helpful. And these things are not reaching the ears of a lot of the people. You know, they're watching the TV, and the TV is telling you to be afraid. Every headline is about fear. You know, growing fears, growing concerns, growing apprehension, new fears, even when it's just weather. You know, here in Maine it snows, and yet the news comes on when it's going to snow, there's a blizzard coming, and they go, a deadly killer storm has us in the crosshairs, you know, and we're all be afraid. And uh, you know, the other day it was tornado terror was the headline. Tornado terror. Well, I know tornadoes are terrifying. I get that, but you have to look at the whole picture. And if you look at the information that's being brought to you on that TV, it's not only is it not the whole picture, a lot of times, I'm sorry to tell you this, America, but they're lying to you. And I've shown this to people and been brutally castigated for doing it. Even showing people pretty much incontrovertible truths about things that are being lied about in the media, they still get angry with me and they say, well, I just don't believe it, and you know they don't want to hear it, and that's where we are right now. So I'd like to see us all, you know, rein that in. Let's start thinking rationally. Use your heads. Um, Evidence leads you where it does. If someone tells you I love the Earth is flat thing. It's a great issue because it's like the core issue, the logic test. Here's where we start. If you think the Earth is flat, look at why you believe that. Ask yourself logical, rational, scientific questions about it, and then compare that to the Earth is a ball and see which of those bears the test of scrutiny. You apply that to every issue out there, you will arrive at rational, logical, hopefully correct conclusions. And as an entire nation, we can start, you know, turning this around and getting all these people, all these elected servants, to be held accountable for their actions. And imagine, if you will, what will happen if one or two of them go down and they get called, like the Jeffrey Epstein flight log comes out, and all the people on it are now being investigated by our illustrious FBI. That will send a message to all of them that we will hold you accountable for your actions, and you will see them starting to fall into line. I think, I hope, my sincere hope that we will see that happen. So,
I watched a documentary on that. Had to do with the police agency that was down in that area when he was in Florida, and they had a search warrant. Somebody tipped him off. They went in there, and all the computers were quickly removed, and they just left the wires right there. And then they were talking about how his walls were they weren't like drywall; they were textured, and he was able to hide cameras inside those in that texture. And I'm going, all right, what did you have on people?
yeah, that's a whole other podcast right there. We
Oh yeah,
we could
yeah,
go off on that one, but
yeah.
we're about at the 1 hour mark. So, um, anything else that you want to throw in here that to send us off?
Oh, I just want to make sure people, you got to get behind your sheriff, folks, or actually stand next to them. You know, yeah, when you get behind them, it feels like you're pushing us into the volcano. Stand next to us and reach out, get to know your sheriff. There's all kinds of information out there on the office of the sheriff, and like I said, D Leaf at Barry County. That's BARRY, like the name Barry County.org. And if your sheriff wants that information, I'll be more than happy to ship it to him. I've got anything from common law grand juries to I got a PowerPoint. I call it the People's Sheriff, and there's several slides on there, especially towards the end when I start talking about how like the Mac Prince case and what Justice Scalia referred to the sheriff as a chief law enforcement officer, and talked about having to stand behind his oath. And it's really interesting because that's what Sheriff Mack brought up in his argument, is that he had to choose between his oath of office and I'm sorry, my wife just asked me a question. I shook my head no.
That's okay.
Anyways, between his oath of office and carrying out this unconstitutional order, which was the Brady Bill, and it still didn't mean the entire Brady Bill was unconstitutional, because they still do those background checks. But again, stand beside them.
Amen.
Got one you don't like, go get a new one. I mean, that's the beauty of your elections.
I'm going to throw something in here really quickly because basically you don't know this, okay? But everything you just said, I said. Exact
Oh,
same thing. Yes. Okay. Early on, one of the first things I said to America in one of my earlier podcasts is you need to get to know your sheriff. Send him a letter of support. I wrote something called my conditional declaration of support for a constitutional sheriff, which I'll put a link in here in the comments, which in essence says I'm a constitutional American. So long as my sheriff honors his oath of office and upholds the Constitution and defends the Constitution, he will have my absolute complete support in every way, and that includes if I have to get on a media source and defend his actions or his words from unfair criticism, I will do that. I will join the posse if he sees fit to call upon one, and I will absolutely make sure that I have his back in every way. And I will say this: here in Maine, I'm not grandstanding. This is the truth. We're very fortunate. We have a lot of good folks out here as sheriffs. A little while back, we had some of the Bloomberg folks were trying to push through some gun control legislation, and I'm very active in opposing that, along with a lot of folks here in Maine as well. We're pretty fond of our guns, and we're fond of our Second Amendment, so we weren't too happy about that. And a whole bunch of our sheriffs made a commercial called "Sheriffs Oppose" and risked the fallout to be very publicly against this unconstitutional. It was foolish. It was mandatory background checks for all firearm sales and purchases and transfers, which means if I want to borrow a shotgun from my neighbor to go duck hunting, we have to both go down to the gun store and get a background check and to
lost
pay
you
a fee, and it was insane. The
again.
whole thing was ridiculous. So anyway, and the sheriffs, a lot of the sheriffs here, came out and made this wonderful, very factual and very rational TV commercial called Sheriff's Oppose, and explained to the folks of people of Maine, the good people of Maine, why this was not a good thing and wouldn't stop crime. God bless them for doing that. So I am
Uh, I
grateful to them.
I did something on the news, and I was asked. It was right after Sandy Hook, and I took the news media right into one of our gun shops, and it's a pretty big gun store, and it was perfect because as I'm walking in, there was two Chevy trucks. One was the stock out of the factory, and the other one had the lift kit, the big tires, the roll bar, the they weren't KC lights, the LED lights and all that stuff. And I said, I need you to take a picture of this truck here and then this truck here. And he said, why? I said, just do it. Trust me. So we go on inside, and I took just a simple Ruger 1022, put the stock one down there, and I put the one that had the pistol grip and the fancy sights on it and extended magazine. I said, see this? This was your stock truck out here. I said, this is your jacked up truck over here. I said, we do the same thing with our guns that we do with our trucks. And I said, it doesn't make the gun any more deadly. It just we're guys. We're rednecks. We do this stuff. And then he wouldn't answer the question on camera. And I said, did you go to prom? He says, yeah. I said, did your date put on makeup? He says, I'm not going there. And I'm going, but still, we do that. And this is the makeup.
It's a valid question. Yeah, that's a
I just
whole
thought it was common sense and
that's a whole podcast there too. So we
perfect timing.
can't get started on that. So all right. Well,
Real quick,
yeah, go ahead.
before you go, I got to put a plug in. If you want your sheriff more educated, September 30th and October 1st, CSPOA is doing a conference. We're trying to get fundraising so we can get your sheriff there so there's nothing out of his pocket or out of the taxpayers' pocket themselves. We're trying to get them there, just like I did back in 2009, 2010. We want them there to go learn and find out what the CSPOA is about and what your powers are. And if you can, donate to the CSPOA just for that conference, or get your group together and pay for your sheriff his airfare and whatever the costs are. Get him on out there, and we'll do everything we can to educate them.
Thank you. Yeah, well said. And I will gladly support you. Let's stay in touch on that because I'll support you on that, and I'll use my meager influence to try to get the word out there as well. And we'll see if any of the sheriffs here in Maine might want to go, and maybe we can get some representation from Maine down there. So
Oh, that'd be awesome.
it would. All right, Sheriff Dar Leaf, Berry County, Michigan. Thank you God bless you, sir. Thank you for joining me and for sharing your message and really been a pleasure talking to you. I'd like to keep going, but like I said, I like to keep it kind of bite-sized whenever I can. Maybe we'll have an occasion to talk again.
You've been a breath of fresh air. Sometimes I feel like I'm standing alone. So
You are not alone,
yeah,
sir.
thank you.
I have the same comments come from other sheriffs that I have talked to that they if they just had the support. So that's why we got to get that support. We got to get the people behind you guys. I'm behind you. Other people are, and we've been talking to my friend Donna. God bless her. She is fantastic, a wonderful ally, a sister of light, woman of God. And there's a lot of others out there. We just got to reach them. So hopefully, God willing, it will keep going. We'll start building some momentum. See things change.
Sounds
All
good to
right,
me. Have
America.
a good
Thank
night.
you for watching. God bless you all. God bless you, planet Earth. And this is the Angry Citizen signing off. Uh, take care, everyone. Close end.